Hey everybody, this is part two of your lesson on weathering, erosion, and deposition. So last week I talked about just it in general. Like I did a demonstration basically showing you all three steps in motion at the same time. And so this week I will be doing videos that are more in-depth on each step. So this time I will just talk about just weathering by itself. So let's get started. So for weathering, we're talking about the physical breakdown of like natural things like rocks or like sand, dirt, basically any natural thing, right? And I will have a PowerPoint posted in the comments that will just link to what I'm just talking about so you can follow along as I'm talking about it. So it'll make it easier for you to just like understand what I'm talking about. So like I said, weathering, you're basically breaking down any object down to smaller parts. And when you have weathering, there's actually two types. There's mechanical weathering and there's chemical weathering, right? So basically the first part, mechanical weathering, you're breaking down any material physically, like through friction or like just bunching up anything against each other, and they will eventually just like break down. You know how you like you rub anything together, the stronger one will break the weaker one through friction, right? And this can happen through like water, air, like plant roots, basically. And so some examples I can think of are just like a river, like running through rocks. The friction caused by the water will break down the rock eventually over time, right? And turn it into dirt. Or just like, say for example, a sand dune, right? Those are just like just high tops of sand, and they will eventually just be like whisked away through like wind or water, either way, right? And there's some other types that I'm also having up on the PowerPoint, like a process called frost wedging, right? Where it's like, think of like a sidewalk. You know how you walk through a sidewalk and you see like cracks in the sidewalk, and you're like, step on a crack, break your mother's back, you know? Those cracks are actually caused by weathering. And basically what's happening is water basically seeps into like this tiny small cracks in the sidewalk, and as it gets colder the water will freeze and turn to ice, and ice takes up more space than water does, like molecularly. And so basically what happens is if the water freezes to ice and the ice is bigger than the water, then like where is the bigger ice gonna go? Like it has to find some place to go, and if it's inside the sidewalk, it has to break the sidewalk and like basically create a larger, bigger crack in the rock. And that could be like any rock whatsoever, as long as the water is inside there and it gets cold, right? And also another example is like plant roots. Like obviously if a tree is trying to get nutrients through the soil and there's a rock in the way, the roots will try to go around the rock if possible. But if it can't, they're actually strong enough that they can just break through the rock and like break the rock down to smaller bits, basically. So yeah, those are the only examples I can really think of. Some like major examples, like the Grand Canyon, that was initially not what it is today. It was just like a plot of land, like a normal plot of land that was broken down over millions of years through just like rivers and like just weathering, any type of weathering through millions of years. And that's how we got the Grand Canyon, because of like the Colorado River, basically. And so the other part of weathering, the second half, is chemical weathering, which is not something you really have to know that much. You just have to know that it exists. And then basically think of it like a chemical reaction. You're breaking down really any material like chemically through like chemical reactions, basically. And it's a chemical change, as we talked about in your last unit. Basically think of like iron rusting, or like a phenomenon called acid rain, right? And I have some pictures up on the PowerPoint so you can see. It's hard to explain without really looking at it, but like if you look at the PowerPoint, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's weathering. Part 3 will be on just erosion and maybe deposition. We'll see.